Thanks for tuning in to your daily dose of quick real estate updates, local housing trends, and market data, plus tips, tools, and strategies to help you buy, rent, or invest with confidence. You're now getting ready with RealiCare Reports, powered by the innovation team, Cami and Rex. Now go grab your favorite morning beverage, whether that's coffee or tea, and let's enjoy this episode.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're zoning in on something local, here in Brevard County, Florida. It's the plan to widen Ellis Road.
Yeah, it seems straightforward, maybe just another road project.
Exactly, but it's actually been a huge priority for a long time. So our mission today is to really unpack why. Who does this affect, and what's the real timeline? We've looked at reports from Space Coast Daily, Florida Today, and the county website to piece it all together.
Okay, let's get into it. It is pretty interesting how one road can become such a big deal.
Right.
And like you said, the sources confirm it. Ellis Road widening. It's been the #1 transportation priority for Brevard County and the Space Coast TPO for, the last decade?
10 years.
It just shows how everything's connected, economic growth, getting around, even tourism, all hinging on this one stretch of road.
Totally. And when you dig into the why, it's clear Ellis isn't just some side street. It links I-95, major employers, and crucially, the Melbourne-Orlando International Airport, MLB.
That airport connection is key, isn't it?
Absolutely. We're talking about a gateway for maybe 20,000 employees just in that area.
Yeah.
Every day.
Wow.
And then add the airport's growth on top of that, it's getting intense.
Especially with those projections, right?
Yeah.
Over 500,000 more travelers expected, partly thanks to new airlines like TUI coming in.
Yeah, TUI bringing in UK tourists specifically. That's a lot of new traffic.
And it directly ties infrastructure to the economy. I saw that quote from Michael Ayers at the Melbourne Regional Chamber.
Oh, yeah.
He basically called it a critical component for continued growth. Businesses really see good roads as fundamental.
And it's not just the big picture. We heard from companies like Leonardo DRS. They're worried about getting and keeping good employees if the commute's bad.
Right.
They're saying they need this upgrade like yesterday. It really hits home when you hear it from employers on the ground.
Well, yeah. Think about it from their perspective. If you're deciding where to set up shop or stay long term, you're looking at commute times, how easily you can get supplies in and out.
Logistics, yeah.
Exactly. A bottleneck like Ellis Road. That's a real drag on efficiency. It makes you maybe look elsewhere, where the infrastructure's better.
Makes total sense.
Yeah.
And the airport director, Greg Donovan, he brought up congestion and safety too. He called Ellis Road the first impression for visitors. That kind of reframes it, doesn't it? It's not just us locals stuck in traffic.
No, absolutely. That's the tourism angle. Imagine flying in, you're excited to see the Space Coast, and your first experience is gridlock or feeling unsafe. That colors your whole perception.
Yeah, not ideal. So, okay, what's the actual fix they're planning?
So the plan is to widen it from the current 2 lanes to 4 lanes.
Okay.
With a median down the middle, it covers about 1.7 miles, roughly from John Rhodes Boulevard over to west of Wickham Road.
Sounds simple enough, but this has been talked about for, over 20 years?
Yeah, easily 2 decades in the making, which, isn't actually that unusual for big infrastructure projects.
Really? Why so long for just under 2 miles?
Well, think about all the steps. You've got initial studies, environmental checks, finding the money, designing it, buying up the land needed.
The right-of-way stuff.
Exactly. And in this case, they need bits of land from over 80 different parcels.
Right.
That takes time. Then you have to move utilities, power lines, water pipes, all that.
Right.
And then you can finally build. Plus, you've got different agencies involved, public input. It all adds up.
And it's interesting, the I-95 interchange there is already done.
Yeah.
Right, and part of the St. John's Heritage Parkway.
Yeah, those pieces are in place, which just highlights how Ellis Road itself is the remaining pinch point. All that traffic funnels onto this older 2-lane road.
And didn't one source mention something like 60 driveways and side streets connecting to it?
Over 60, yeah. So you've got constant stop-start traffic, people turning in and out. It just adds to the congestion.
Okay, so clearly needed. But you mentioned finding the money. That sounds like a big hurdle here.
It definitely became one. The reports mention a $25 million funding gap that popped up during the recent planning cycle.
Oof. That's substantial. Where does money for roads usually come from?
It's typically a mix, federal highway funds, state money often from gas taxes, and then local contributions. Maybe property taxes, sometimes specific impact fees.
And grants, too.
Grants are huge, yeah, but they're competitive. So a gap like this, $25 million, it could be rising construction costs, which we're seeing everywhere.
Tell me about it.
Or maybe expected grant money didn't come through, or state budgets shifted. Lots of reasons.
So how do they fix that gap?
Well, this is actually a bit of a positive story. It looks like a real partnership formed. You've got Brevard County, the TPO, the State DOT, FDOT District 5, and the cities, Melbourne and West Melbourne, all chipping in.
Okay, so a team effort to plug the hole.
Exactly. And getting it into FDOT's 5-year work program is a big step. That means it's officially on the state's radar for funding.
And it goes to the legislature next year for the budget.
Correct. That's the next key approval needed to lock down the state portion of the funding.
Meanwhile, FDOT has been buying up the land, the right-of-way.
Yep, they've been working on that. The goal is to have all that land acquisition wrapped up by early 2025. Which, like we said, involves negotiating with over 80 property owners. Some are full takes, some just partial strips of land.
That sounds like a headache in itself. What does that process usually look like? Is it just offering money?
Well, it starts with appraisals, figuring out fair market value, then negotiations. Ideally, it's a straightforward purchase.
But sometimes
Sometimes it gets complicated. Disputes over value, legal challenges. In some cases, the state might have to use eminent domain, but that's usually a last resort. It's definitely a critical step, though. Can't build if you don't own the land.
Right. So land by early 25, then what?
The plan seems to be start clearing the land. Clearing and grubbing is the term, in summer or fall 2025.
Okay.
Then there's about a 9-month window needed just for utility companies to come in and move all their stuff out of the way.
9 months just for utilities.
Wow. It's complex work. You've got power, water, sewer, communications lines. It all has to be relocated carefully before road construction can really start.
So add that up. When does actual road building begin?
If things go smoothly, they're aiming for spring 2026 to start construction.
Okay, spring 26. That feels somewhat concrete.
It does. It's interesting how the cost estimates have bounced around, too. Back in 2012, they were talking over $50 million. Now, the total construction estimate is over $40 million.
Still a hefty price tag.
Oh, absolutely. And FDOT has programmed, I think, $19.4 million specifically for construction in the 2025-26 budget year as part of that.
So spring 26 start, that's the optimistic view, but when do they think it'll actually be finished?
That's where some concern creeps in. Some sources are floating a completion date around mid-2028.
Mid-2028, so over 2 years of construction.
Potentially, yeah. And you can understand why business leaders are hearing that and thinking, that feels like a long time.
Especially if they feel they need it now.
Exactly. It highlights that tension, doesn't it? The need for careful, planned infrastructure work versus the immediate pressures of a growing economy.
Has there been any pushback on that timeline?
Yeah, the Melbourne Chamber actually sent a letter to FDOT. They're basically urging them to speed things up if possible, especially that right-of-way process.
Try and shave off some time there.
Right. And there's apparently a meeting coming up in June between FDOT and local officials. You'd expect this timeline to be a major topic.
Definitely one to watch.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's good to remember this isn't the only road project happening.
True. The sources mentioned a few others briefly, widening SR 528, though that design's on pause for a water study.
Right.
Babcock Street down in Palm Bay is under study, and some improvements on A1A up in Cape Canaveral. It puts Ellis Road in context. It's the top priority, but there's a lot going on across the Space Coast.
And it speaks to how long these things take, right?
Yeah.
You mentioned the Babcock study funded by impact fees, probably years away from construction.
Oh, yeah. 10, 15, even 20 years from concept to completion isn't uncommon for major transportation projects. All those steps we talked about, environment, funding, design, land, utilities. It just takes a long, long time.
So let's sort of wrap this up. The big takeaway seems to be Ellis Road widening is absolutely vital for the Space Coast's economy, especially with the airport booming.
Definitely. Driven by growth, no doubt.
It's hit some snags, particularly with funding and maybe the timeline, but that collaborative effort seems to be pushing it forward.
Yeah, the partnership between the county, cities, TPO, and FDOT looks crucial here.
But there's still those question marks about how long it will ultimately take to finish.
Right. And maybe that leaves us with a final thought for, everyone listening. When you see a project like this, 20 years in the making already.
Yeah.
And still facing hurdles with cost, land, timelines. What does that tell us about building infrastructure in a place that's growing as fast as the Space Coast? It's this constant balancing act, isn't it? Between today's traffic jams and planning for tomorrow's needs.
And you wonder, what other unexpected things could still pop up and affect this project before it's finally done?
Exactly. It really underscores the complexity involved. A fascinating, if sometimes frustrating, process to watch unfold.
Well, that wraps up today's episode of Reality Reports, where real estate meets real life. For more updates, tools, and insights that will help you buy, rent, or invest with confidence, be sure to follow, subscribe, stay connected, stay informed, and stay ready. Until next time.